We produce 80% of our food on a tiny piece of land. If you think you need a big farm to become self-reliant, think again. Even if you only start with a few potted herbs or some salad greens, you're taking a huge step towards self-reliance. In this video, I want to share what I've learned after 35 years of small homesteading to help you stack simple skills one layer at a time so that you can build a strong foundation and grow your own homestead wherever you are. Before you start digging or planting anything, I want you to take some time to look over your entire space, even if it's just a backyard. Where does the sun hit throughout your yard at different times of the day? Are there natural areas that water collects? How about slopes in your yard? These are all things that you can work with. Think about areas where you might want to put your animals, barns, and sheds, because these are important. These are structures you need to think ahead of time so that you can plan your garden first. You might have structures that you have to work with. You want to pay attention where they cast their shade at it. Is it throughout the day? Because if it is, that's probably not the best place to put your garden. Also think about where you're going to put your compost pile. It needs to be in an area that's easy to get. A nice place is near your garden, but you don't want it right off your back porch. I'll talk more about compost in just a few minutes, but the most important thing to know is that compost is your garden's lifeline. Walk around and visualize what your place is going to look like in 2, 5, or even 10 years down the road. Thinking about these big pieces first will save you so much frustration later. Once you have a big picture of what your place is going to look like, then you can start with the first steps, starting a simple garden and a compost system to feed it. I have a free composting guide to help you on your way to build healthier soil, and you can get that link in the description below. Whether you're growing your garden now or not, now's the perfect time to start getting your compost stuff together and start building that pile. Your climate and growing zone really does matter. Here in southern Utah, I have about 195 days of frost-free days. That means I have a long growing season for warm season crops. If you live in an area where you're getting 90 days or less, then make sure that you pick fast maturing vegetables that are warm season crops, or you're probably going to have to use high tunnels and low tunnels to extend your growing season. We also have a pretty mild winter here, so it's easy to grow a lot of our cool season crops throughout the winter without much protection. But high tunnels and low tunnels definitely give us that edge to where things produce a little bit faster and we get more food through the winter times. One of the best ways to know what you should be growing in your area is to ask a neighbor or a friend that gardens, because they've had that experience and they'll know what does well in your area. Once you start to learn your garden and what grows well seasonally, then you can start to scale up, but don't overwhelm yourself the first year. For a vegetable garden, you'll need at least 8 hours of sunlight for most vegetables to do well. And having a water spigot nearby is really important. For years, I drug a hose around to water the garden, and I found that I didn't water that garden very well. When things are hard to do, they don't get done very well. So we finally bit the bullet and trenched to put in some spigots to each one of our beds. And in the long run, that time we spent trenching has saved me an enormous amount of time. We water our vegetable garden with a secondary watering system. And off of that, we use a drip tape for a deep soak. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. If you haven't gardened before or not much at all, then I recommend you start out small. Just an area that's 3 by 6 or even a raised bed that's 3 by 6 or even 2 is a great place to start. I've seen several people where they've started out with large gardens, get overwhelmed, and then don't garden again. When you can focus all of your efforts in one small area, you're more than likely going to succeed without that overwhelm because it's easier to manage. When you pick an area to start gardening, make sure that you have room to expand for later on. Once you start to build your skills and confidence and your know-how, then you can grow that garden with ease. If you don't have a yard, a backyard, or a side yard yet, then that's totally okay. You can still use a sunny balcony, a deck, or even a patio to grow things in containers. And that's a great place to start. This is where you can start to get creative. Large pots, buckets, and grow bags all can become your mini garden. Growing herbs in pots is one of the easiest things that you can start with. Salad greens is great in the springtime, and even a tomato plant or two is a great place to start towards your self-reliance. The most important thing is to just start, no matter how small, and build off of your successes and expand as you learn. You really don't need a big space to start homesteading. All you need is the willingness to start right where you are. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people do, and I've done this plenty of times myself, is they plant things that look fun, but they don't actually eat them. I'm all for trying new things, but when you're limited in space or you're learning how to garden, I would say put that off for another year. Before you plant anything, make a list of the vegetables that your family eats most often. Choose high-yielding and versatile crops. Things like peppers and tomatoes and carrots are all good places to start. These are also good things for keeping. They preserve well. If you're limited on space and you want versatility, don't choose space-hogging plants like this pumpkin plant right back here. This bed is a 5x9 and there's 2 pumpkin plants in it, and as you can see, it's taken over the entire area. There's a couple things that I like to do to maximize small space or small raised beds. I love to plant root crops or onions right on the outside edge, and behind that, I'll plant a little bit taller crop like beans, and then a couple of peppers behind that. And then you can use something on the back side that you can grow vertically. On the back side here, I have an old bed frame, some cucumbers that are going to grow up it, as well as some pole beans. Whether you're new to gardening or if you've been gardening for a while, then you know that good tools make light work. And I'm going to go over some of the tools that I use on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to start with the trowels, the hand trowels. Hand trowels can be used in whatever style gardening you're doing, whether you're gardening in pots, raised beds, or in ground. Trowels can be used for planting things, making furrows, pulling up weeds. They're just the basic must-have. Rubber buckets are another thing that I use on a day-to-day basis, whether I'm using them for harvesting, putting weeds in, carrying compost to the garden, or even putting potting soil or even mixing potting soil. A variety of different rubber buckets are very useful. I use them every single day. On my way out to the garden, every single time I go out into the garden, I'm always grabbing some clippers of some kind. Pruners, snippers, clippers, scissors, whatever, they're all really handy to have in the garden. Big pruners like this are great for woody plants, and then the smaller ones are great for deadheading and clipping off things like your peppers and eggplants so that you don't tear the plant apart. These are awesome to keep on hand, either in a mailbox or you can put them in a pouch, or a bucket works great. That way you can put your clippers in here, you don't lose them. I usually put some gloves in here, and I also put some twine in here. You can put tags in here, you can strap it right to your waist, and all of your gear is traveling right with you when you need it, and you don't lose it in the mess of the garden. I always have my twine with me too, because I'm always having to tie up some tomatillos or tomatoes or even the cucumbers just to help them get trellising up. Whether you're using a vinyl twine, a jute, or some other type of a tie, this is really handy to have on hand, and it's pretty inexpensive. Think about things that are going to make your life a little bit easier in the garden, such as buckets to put your tools in so that you can take it all out into the garden at once, or even a mailbox right at the opening of your garden gate. I really like this because I can keep tools or little items that I need in the garden, things like some clippers, some twine, and even some clips that I can have it right here, and I'm not running back and forth. Everything's ready to go, and it makes life a little bit easier when you're working in the garden. Having some small hand tools is really great to have near the garden too. Things like little trowels and rakes and weeders right near the garden, and having their own little spot so that you always know where they're at will help you keep organized. And they're great to be using throughout the garden, and I wouldn't garden without these little tools. Digging forks are another thing that I use at least once a week in my garden. It's just a tined fork that's flat. This is great for lifting up potatoes, sweet potatoes, and loosening soil. Another option to that is a broad fork. Now these are really heavy, they move a lot of soil, and they're a lot more expensive. And this one basically does a good job for whatever you need. And you can also turn your compost with this as well. Broad forks are great for when you're starting out new garden beds that are right in the ground for loosening the soil. I like the broad fork because I've got the two handles on it. It's extremely heavy and I can just put it right into the ground and loosen the soil without disturbing the soil web too much. Now the nice thing about these is I can also put a layer of compost over my garden, put this in there and slightly work it in as well. Once you start getting into composting, then you might want a pitchfork. The digging fork will work fine, but the nice thing about a pitchfork is it only has 3 tines. And it's great for moving bigger types of material without it getting stuck on the fork itself. It's good for turning in the very beginning. You could also use a manure fork where it has smaller tines than the digging fork does, same size as the pitchfork, but it has a few more tines on it. But it will get stuck just a little bit. And as your compost starts to get better and it starts to get ready, then a bedding fork is really great for getting your compost out of the pile, putting it in a bucket or a wheelbarrow, because you can take bigger scoops because your tines are closer together. Another thing that I find very valuable for my vegetable garden is a watering can. Now I don't water all of my plants with this because I've got a lot of plants and that would take a long time. But if you do have a patio with just a few potted plants, then a water can would be great for that. But what I do use it for is to mix liquid fertilizers in it so that I can use it as a soil drench if any of my plants seem to be a little sluggish and need just a little oomph. I also like these little pump sprayers. They're lightweight, inexpensive, and I love them for doing a foliar feeding in my garden. I can get the job done quickly. I usually mix a liquid kelp in here or a compost tea to use as a foliar feeding on my vegetable plants, and I do this about every 10 days. These are just a few essential tools that I use on a day-to-day basis that makes my workflow much easier and more enjoyable, and I'm sure that you'll find that they're helpful to you as well. And as you start to learn more and your garden grows, your tool shed will start to get larger. Healthy soil is everything. You can't grow nutrient-dense vegetables with dead soil. If you want strong, healthy plants, then you have to start from the ground up. The easiest way to jumpstart your garden soil is with compost, well-rotted manure, and even fall leaves. Even if your space is tiny like a patio, you can start composting in a bucket, a kitchen composter, or even a worm bin. Worm bins are amazing. They're small, they don't smell, they make an amazing soil amendment called worm castings, and the best part is you can use up your kitchen scraps this way. When you're starting with a raised bed, you're just going to have good soil to start with. You'll be filling it with good stuff in it. The bottom, you can just use things like newspaper, cardboard, sticks, and build your way up. Even some raw manure and grass clippings is fine in small amounts. And then make sure that you top it off with good compost. And to make these raised beds, they can be done out of just about anything. Some old reclaimed wood, some bricks, some rocks, and even old stock tanks all work great for raised beds. If you want more detail on how to fill your raised beds, then we have other videos on that, and you can go check that out here. For in-ground gardens, these are gardens that don't have a frame around them, where you're just going to be gardening right in that existing soil. You want to remove all of the weeds and rocks and plot out or mark out where your garden's going to go. There's 2 ways that you can start your garden bed to create good soil. And the first one we're going to talk about is the no-dig method. When we talk about no-dig soil, this means that we're not going to disturb the soil, but rather we're going to layer things on top. And one of the best things to do, of course, is compost. Add several inches of compost over the top. What this is going to do is work its way down through by worms and microbes, and that's going to start to loosen up the soil and improve nutrient content availability for the plants that you're going to be growing in it. If it's fall time, this is a really great time to improve your soil for free. One way, and one of the best ways that I think to improve hard compacted soil, is shredded leaves. A nice thick layer of shredded leaves right over the top of moist soil. You need that soil to be moist as well as those leaves. And then over the top of that, you can add some compost and water this all in and let it just mellow over the winter time. And come springtime, you'll be amazed at how great your soil is. When I first started my garden here, it was heavy compacted clay soil. So I did till the ground and I incorporated a lot of manure and compost in it. I did this for the first few years and then it started to become looser. And at that time, then I started to just do layering with the compost. And now the soil's nice and loose. It does take time to build that soil web, to get all those microbes active and alive, to make that soil alive. It's not going to happen overnight, but by adding compost and organic matter, this is going to increase it. And this is why we don't want to be over-tilling our soil. Breaking it up every once in a while is fine, but the over-tillage problems can break up that soil web, and it takes time to build that soil web. In my honest opinion, through the experience of starting our garden, I do think there is a time and a place to be using a tiller. But once you've started to develop that soil web, then that's when you can switch to the digging fork and the broad fork so that you can keep as much as that soil web in contact. So why should we focus so much on the soil? Well, healthy soil means healthy plants. And healthy plants feed you, your family, and your community a lot better. Think of your soil as the stomach of your garden. It digests the organic matter, making it available as food for your plants. I like to apply compost at least twice a year to replenish the nutrients that I've taken out by planting a vegetable garden. And another thing that I make sure that I do, when I pull a plant out or a section out, I always apply compost and plant again right away. And if a plant looks a little tired, I'll go ahead and apply a layer of compost at that time too. When you're first starting out your vegetable garden, it's totally fine to buy some good, reputable compost to add to your garden if you aren't already building your own. But in the long run, we want our gardens to be self-sustaining, and our end goal is for us to start creating our own compost. Besides, it is the best. Now, where should you put your compost pile? This is something that you should think about in the beginning when you're designing your layout of your land. If your garden is close to your house, you probably don't want your compost pile right next to your back door. You'll want to tuck it in the very far corner of your garden, a little bit further away from your house. My compost piles are in the back portion of our yard. This is where all of our animal pens are located. So this is easy access. When I clean out the pens, I go straight into the compost pile. And the goat pen gets cleaned out every day. So it's nice having it close by. Finished compost only comes into the garden about once a month. So that just makes sense for me. Also, our orchard is between the animal pens, the compost bin, and our garden that's right here. And I'm always applying compost to the orchard trees as well. The downside to where my compost is located is it's not near my garden. I actually have to go through the orchard to get the garden that's on the other end of our property. But it's not a big deal because I'm filling that wheelbarrow, hauling it a few extra steps, and it works perfect for me. So do what works for you and put it in the best location for you. I've moved my compost pile about 6 times since we've lived here. That was a lot of work to get it figured out exactly where I wanted it because I really had no plan. So save yourself some work right now. Figure out where you're going to put it. Make sure that it's going to work well for you in that area. And also make sure that you have a water spigot nearby because that's something you're definitely going to need. You don't need fancy compost bins to build your compost pile. It actually does better when it has contact with the ground. Composting shouldn't cost you a thing, from the bins that you make to the ingredients that go into making that compost. Be resourceful. To make your bins, you can use some old pallets or even some old fencing. The compost ingredients come from the scraps from your kitchen, the debris in your garden, fallen leaves, and your animal manure. And the list goes on. I'll give you a link in the description below of a list of all the things that you could and should be putting into your compost to make some awesome compost. One of the biggest things when it comes to making compost is don't overthink it. Think about nature. Things drop, they decompose, and that's just the way it is. Things will decompose over time. Yeah, there's some tricks to help you make better compost, but if you just start putting things together, keeping the moisture there, then you're going to make some awesome compost. Compost isn't a perfect science. It's a natural process. Water is essential for growing a garden. You can't grow a garden without water. But a lot of times people will overwater and waterlog the soil, and that's not good for the plants. Or they'll just water the surface, watering lightly, and that's just as bad. When we overwater and waterlog the soil, then the roots don't get the oxygen that they need. We're creating an anaerobic situation, and oftentimes this will kill your plants. But on the other hand, when we just surface water, where we're only giving a tiny bit of water on the top, then the plants can't penetrate down into the soil. They're staying on the surface, trying to get all the water that they can. Now, watering on the surface is good when you're doing seedlings, when you're just sowing the seeds directly in the ground until they get germinated and start to take off. Then we need to start watering deeper. Not all soil is created equal. Clay soil is going to retain that moisture and not need to be watered as often. And sandy soil, well, it's going to drain really well, and so you're going to find that you're going to need to water more often. By adding compost to both these types of soils is going to help with drainage as well as retaining moisture. Because every soil structure is different, you can't water every soil the same way on the same schedule. Even in each one of my beds, I have to water differently. Some have more clay base, some are more loamy, and they drain better. So you actually have to stick your finger in the soil down about an inch or two, and if it's moist down there, then it's not time to water. I usually wait until the top 1 inch starts to dry out before I start watering again. I use a drip tape system to water my garden. This works really good for me. I can turn it on for several hours and it'll just do a slow drip, penetrating that water deep into the soil, which of course is going to cause the roots to go down deep. So it actually uses 1/10 of the amount of water that it would if I were to be using a sprinkler system. For one, it's watering at the soil level and below. That slow drip is going to cause that water to go down nice and deep. If I were using a sprinkler system, then I'm using a lot of water just in the atmosphere. Now, I do like to put a sprinkler on every once in a while, maybe every 2 weeks or so, just to give the garden just a rinse, get all that dust off of the leaves. The drip tape is just tape. It's just this flat tube, and it has little emitters. You can get it in 8 inches apart or 12 inches apart. Really, all it is just a little slit in here. So you turn your water on at a very low pressure. Usually around 8 pounds to 10 pounds of pressure is all you need. More than that, then you can explode the tape. But it just slowly drips out of this. On the end, all you have to do is cut a little end off. It's just a little sleeve. You fold the tape over and put that little sleeve right over the top. You can get a little end piece for it, but this saves you a lot of money. To feed your drip tape, then you're going to need a poly tubing. And you just pop a little hole in here with your tool, pop a hole in there, and then you put a barb fitting right inside that tubing. And then you screw on, or actually you push on your tape, and then you screw down the coupler right here to make it nice and tight, and it's as easy as that. This is easily connected to just a hose bib, and I have a hose bib for each one of my garden beds. This is really nice because I can control what bed needs to be watered when. And you just use a little female fitting, and that just goes right into your poly, just as easy as that. One thing that I do like though is they do make a valve for your barb fittings. And these are really nice because you can use these in placement of the barb. And if you had 4 or 5 running down a line, then you could shut one off if you didn't need, say, like one of the sides of your garden beds. To reduce the risk of blowing out your drip tape, you can use a pressure regulator and put right on your spigot and run your drip tape right off of that. Our water fluctuates quite a bit here, at least our irrigation water. And so sometimes it'll be really high and sometimes it'll be really low. And when it's high, it can just blow out my hoses. So I put a 7 GPM, gallons per minute, on my spigot, and then that reduces it to where I don't have any chances of blowing out my drip tape. This makes my system pretty much flawless and worry-free. To get an adequate amount of water for each one of my beds that are 3 foot wide, I'm running 3 lines of drip tape down them, and they're spaced about a foot apart. For a 2 foot wide bed, run 2 lines down it, and for a 4 foot wide bed, run 4 lines down it, and so on. I've used this drip tape system for well over 30 years, and I have no reason to change it because I love how it works so well. It's super easy to set up, it's proven to be effective, and if you put a timer on it, then your garden watering can almost take care of itself. I added a link to the drip tape that I use in the description below if you want to check it out. And mulch is extremely important for your garden. It's going to serve you several purposes. The most important is it's going to retain that moisture in the soil. So you're not going to have the moisture fluctuations, which is going to make the plants happier and more productive. It's also going to protect that soil that you've been working on and building. It's going to keep weeds down. So that means less work for you in the long run. Your first year isn't going to be perfect, and if it is, I'm going to take lessons from you. You can expect failures. Things are going to die, pests are going to come in, but the most important thing is to just keep growing and learn from these lessons. And something that I think that's really important and really helpful is keeping a garden notebook. Write down things that worked, what didn't work, and the next year, you're going to be happy that you did. I think one of the most important things when you just start gardening or homesteading is to start small. If you mastered what you did this year, then you can build off of that and do more next year. If it was too much, then definitely scale back. We definitely want to avoid burnout. Just stay consistent in what you're doing and continue to grow. Homesteading is about small, intentional steps. You don't need a huge farm, and you don't need perfection. You just need to start and grow from there. Enjoy the process, and don't forget to ask God for guidance. And when you're ready to take the next step, then check out this video here, and may God bless you.